Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal, where every second ticks closer to a hidden truth. Tonight, we return to the shadowed streets of London, a city where danger does not announce itself, and violence wears the mask of ordinary life. In this story by Ernest Bramah, a name is whispered rather than spoken, the Bravo of London. A figure without a face, a hand that strikes without warning, and a mystery that survives only because it is underestimated. Listen carefully, for in the quietest moments, London is at its most deadly. Part 3. Chapter 9, in which the assurance of the eye deceives the mind. The man who had come in by the front gate and who was walking up the path, trundling a buckled and deflated bicycle at his side, looked up at the cry, but he made no response, nor did he evince any appreciable sign of recognition. His face had a gray, strained look, not as of fear or apprehension now, but as though some terrible experience had come suddenly and passed and left a benumbed and abiding impression. He took in the 5 people gathered there with an incurious acceptance that passed them by, and it was distressingly obvious that if left to himself, he would go straight on by the way he knew, and not bestow another glance or a thought about what they were doing. When Miss Tilehurst laid an impulsive hand on his arm, he stopped, but it was as an obedient cart horse stops, and without any personal concern in the proceedings. "Geoffrey, my dear, what is it? Why don't you speak?" implored Miss Tilehurst rather wildly. "Oh, my goodness, look at his poor face!" "Have you had an accident, Geoffrey? Are you hurt? Do for God's sake say something." "One moment, my dear lady. You must control yourself," interposed Dr. Ollivant, coming forward with the quiet authority of his recognized position. "Is this?" "Yes, my nephew, whom we've been expecting. He must have met with an accident. Look at his face. Look at the machine. But why doesn't he speak? It's so alarming, so inconsiderate. He may be badly injured for all we know and trying to keep it from us by not talking, but I can't let him go on like this. We must find out if there's anything worse and what has happened." Yes, of course," admitted Ollivant soothingly. "You are naturally distressed, although it may not be anything like so serious as your first impression leads you to imagine. It is extremely probable that this is only a temporary phase, a matter of hours, or possibly days, and our young friend will be all right again and even laughing at his curious experience." "You really think that, Doctor? You aren't just saying it." "My dear Miss Tilehurst, if there were any immediate cause for anxiety, I would be the first to warn you. However, at a time like this, you naturally don't want a stranger. Perhaps I had better go. You will no doubt get along all right. Unless, of course, a considerate afterthought, as a doctor who happens to be on the spot, you would like me to make a provisional examination. If so, need I say, I would be only too glad, some slight return, to put my services freely at your disposal. Oh, doctor, would you? It would be such a blessed relief. I don't mind admitting that I've had a terrible fright, and I'm still, perhaps unreasonably after what you've said, very, very anxious, almost resentfully. If only he would say something. Geoffrey, my darling, don't you recognize us here? Me, Ophelia, Nora?" "Jeff, dear," said Nora, going to his side, "can't you tell me? Don't I recall anything at all? Humph, and Nobbles, you know." But Geoffrey only looked painfully apart and fixed his eyes on the door for which he had been making. Yes," interposed Dr. Ollivant, capably taking charge with the implication that this was all very well in its amateur way, but that it was now time for someone who understood diagnostics to adopt proper methods. "This is quite unlooked for, I assume. There has been no previous indication of your nephew being in any way, shall I say strange? Not suffering from any physical or mental shock lately? Not complaining specially of the heat, or feeling the sun, for instance?" "Nothing at all," declared Miss Tilehurst, searching her mind with conscientious detail. "Of course, we've all grumbled about the weather in an ordinary way, and he may have done too, but it didn't mean anything, and he was perfectly happy and normal up to the time I last saw him. And that was when? At lunch today. Afterwards, he seems to have taken his bicycle out and gone off somewhere, but I didn't know that he was going, or see him go. Ophelia was the last who saw him." "Yes, that's right, I saw him go," confirmed Ophelia, suddenly realizing that this trifling circumstance might invest her with a gratifying importance. "Came through the kitchen with his machine when I was washing up the things after lunch, he did." "Going out for a ride on your bicycle, Mr. Jeffrey?" I said, and then— Yes, there is no doubt that he did go off," interrupted Miss Tilehurst, recognizing just in time that in the eyes of a very literal man, Jeffrey's absurd reply might pass for evidence of an existing state of delirium. "You may take it for granted that he was perfectly normal when he set out, Doctor." "Well, I thought it sounded queer," stuck out Ophelia, tolerantly resentful of being somehow done out of her scene. But as no one attached any importance whatever to anything that Ophelia might think, her testimony faded into the background. Meanwhile, Ollivant had taken his patient's unresisting hand, and under cover of a flow of smooth commonplace was feeling his pulse, critically looking into his eyes, and inspecting his bruised condition. "Now, Mr. Tilehurst, you've evidently had something of an adventure. Can't you tell us a little of what has happened to upset you? Your aunt is naturally concerned to see you behave like this. Surely you will make an effort, just a few words, to relieve her anxiety." "You? Yes. Nothing to say, eh?" For certainly this bland assumption of ability to comply was no more successful than Miss Tilehurst's frenzied appeal, or Nora's more recondite suggestion. "Well, never mind. Suppose you simply write down the name of the place where this occurred, or even your signature." And producing an impressive memorandum tablet from his breast pocket, Dr. Ollivant offered it, together with a pencil, for the purpose. A sigh of relief went up from at least 2 throats. Jeffrey accepted the proffered articles, mechanically indeed, but at any rate he understood the purport of what was said, and for a moment it seemed as though he was engaged in complying with the requirement. Then he held out the pad again. A few meaningless scrawls were the only result of the effort. Yes, exactly," commented the doctor, glancing at the lines and accepting them as if they constituted just what he had expected. "Thank you, Mr. Tilehurst. Not very much, perhaps," he confided to his audience aside. "But still, in the circumstances, something. And to Miss Tilehurst more especially. Oh, he'll be all right again soon. No need for you to worry." "But what am I to do?" she asked, swayed between an intense relief that this obvious authority should treat the matter so lightly, and a feeling that with Jeffrey like that there must be something more than Ollivant would admit behind it. "What is it that has happened?" Even without our having anything more than this extraneous evidence to go on, a gesture indicated his patient's bruised and soiled condition and the damage to his machine. "It is pretty plain what has happened. Your nephew has experienced a severe shock, mental and physical combined, with the not unnatural result that for the time certain functions of the brain have been thrown out of action. Whether he was involved in a collision with someone else, or merely had a spill, or, what is perhaps more probable, received this damage and at the same time underwent the terrifying experience of what is termed a narrow squeak from something much worse, is beside the question. Something happened, and as the result, he is now suffering from what I should confidently predict will be only a temporary form of motor aphasia." "My word, but that sounds bad," confided Ophelia, in the absence of Sultan, to herself. "Them motors didn't ought to be allowed." Inability to speak, that is, of course, amplified Dr. Ollivant with dignified severity. And, as we see here, tapping the pad that he still held, inability to write, agraphia. "You don't think that he may be hurt internally somewhere all the time, Doctor, and unable to tell us? It must surely have been a very severe crash." Not at all. As a matter of fact, physical violence is not necessary to produce the condition of aphasia. Quite recently I was called into a case where a financier fell into the state as a result of unexpected market reverses. 3 days later he suddenly recovered the power of speech completely, on seeing his wife breaking some coal with his favorite golf club. Another case I had. A lady saw a ghost apparently coming out of her husband's bedroom. It was really the housemaid, who then admitted that she was a confirmed sleepwalker. "You have had other cases, then you do actually know all about it?" suggested Miss Tilehurst, still more reassured, though not perhaps choosing her words quite happily. "My dear lady, I am a nerve specialist, of my standing as a consultant. but that is a matter on which it is more befitting for me to leave others to express an opinion," replied Dr. Ollivant with a fine discrimination of manner. "In Harley Street I deal with analogous cases practically every day. Your own doctor will doubtless confirm my diagnosis if you think it necessary to consult him. I suppose we ought to. He has attended Geoffrey for everything from childhood. But oh, how very unfortunate. Dr. Tizer is away on his holidays, and his locum isn't at all. You do think that it would be better for him to be seen by an ordinary doctor as well, don't you? Well, as to that, perhaps you would like me to make a more detailed examination to see definitely if there is any internal trouble, and say what I think then. If so, I'm entirely at your service." "Oh, I should. But it is so very good of you, Dr. Ollivant." "Not at all. Your own man is away, and in cases of emergency professional etiquette is mercifully elastic. The circumstances naturally encourage me to take a personal interest in our young friend here. Besides, I am scientifically concerned in observing the curious and varied effects of these sensory disturbances. Then we will go inside for a few minutes if you will kindly indicate where it will be convenient." Yes, certainly, doctor. You had better be at hand, Ophelia. Dr. Ollivant may require something bringing." "That I will, mum," promised Ophelia. One might even say with an anticipatory gloating. "Now, Mr. Tilehurst, we are going into the house," said the doctor. "Suppose you show me the way." And, obedient to the suggestion, Mr. Tilehurst did lead the way towards the front door, almost naturally. Dr. Ollivant turned to throw a weighty nod of approval towards Miss Tilehurst at this achievement. "I'm so terribly sorry that our afternoon has turned out like this, Mr. Carrados," apologized Miss Tilehurst, stopping for a moment beside her visitors before she hurried on to catch up with the others on the doorsteps. "You won't mind my running away, I know, but I do hope that you will stay and finish your interrupted tea. You will look after him, won't you, Nora? I'll let you hear what Dr. Ollivant says the minute I can, dear. I know that you are quite as anxious as I am. It's all so sudden and alarming, but wasn't it lucky that just the one man in 1,000 should be here?" "Yes, wasn't it?" agreed Mr. Carrados, but as his hostess was well on her way towards the house, and, further, his remark had more significance than polite assent, it was not surprising that Nora was disinclined to let it pass unchallenged. "What do you mean by that, Uncle Max?" she flatly demanded. "Some people don't believe in luck, you know, Nora. I imagine they prefer to regard it as an intelligent anticipation of contributory circumstances. Perhaps Dr. Ollivant is one of them," he temporized. "Look here, Uncle, I don't want a fencing lesson just now, thank you. I want to understand things." "That's what most people really want, Nora. It's what I've been wanting all my life. It's what I go on for. Generally, I have to wait someone else's good time for it." "Well, won't you help me to understand here? Or even let me help you?" It's all simple and straightforward to Miss Tilehurst. I mean, she accepts it, just as it appears on the surface. I can't do that, because I know that you don't do curious things without some motive behind. And now you've started my suspicions, and It's very strange that Geoffrey shouldn't know even me. Are you quite sure that even you know this Geoffrey of yours? That I know Geoffrey? Well, very often a girl thinks that she knows a man through and through, only to find out that she doesn't. It's even been known to happen with a husband and wife who've lived all their life together. "No, it wasn't that," declared Nora, shaking her head rather sadly. "You didn't mean that. Only you don't quite trust me. Uncle Max, you are going on with this, aren't you? You're thinking and planning and finding clues and putting this and that together, aren't you? A little time ago I came up against a locked door, and something baffling, perhaps even villainous, was going on the other side of it," vouchsafed the provoking Carrados. "This afternoon I have picked up a key. It fits the lock, but it doesn't work the levers, not just yet. And I don't even know how to begin to set about looking, but I feel as though a shadow, mysterious and sinister, is creeping up. Something has happened to this bright summer afternoon, and to this peaceful garden, and I think, to me, it's that sort of feeling. And you sit there like a heathen idol, turning everything over in your wonderful mind, and not letting me share a particle. Uncle Max, taking hold of his shoulders and all but shaking him in a transport of exasperation. Don't you understand? I must do something. I can't just sit down and wait. I can't have Jeffrey change. I can't lose him like this. Yes, lose Uncle Max. We were all but engaged lovers. Of course I know it's the doctor's job about treatment and all that, but isn't one of the first things towards putting him right to find out what it was that put him wrong? Suppose it was done by someone deliberately. Yes, there may be something in that, perhaps more than one might think, admitted Mr. Carrados. Let me help you to do it then. You mayn't find me such an utter little rabbit as you might think after all. There are damned few things that I feel I'm afraid of, let me tell you, Uncle Max, and I'm quite ready to take the risks if it comes to that sort of business. My dear, protested the blind man with his incurable air of insouciance, you seem determined to plunge us both into the thick of battle. Well, even you can't be in two places at once, and sometimes you have had to make use of other people's eyes to see by. I think I'm up to the intellectual standard of your Parkinson, and at any rate, you certainly wouldn't miss me half as much as you would him if anything went wrong, dear Uncle Max. If the chance comes along, won't you give me a try? Can't you use me? That's all very well, my dear, but I don't want to have to fight a duel with Tilehurst when he comes round if I've led you into any scrape meanwhile. He protested lightly. Thank you all the same, child, but seriously, you know, if there should be any real unpleasantness ahead, it would hardly be the sort of work to bring a young lady into. Young lady, Nora achieved almost a shriek of despair. Bad language fails me. I always say you are an old dear, uncle, but you are, you really are, the most utter. SSH, warned Carrados. Someone coming, yes. Perhaps I had better SSH, retorted Nora, subsiding. Chapter 10. Nipper contributes to the problem. Will it do in here? Asked Miss Tilehurst. It was the door of the dining room she had opened. The morning room is so dreadfully hot at this time of day, and the drawing room rather overcrowded. This will do admirably, he replied, taking a deliberate look round. Now, there is something you need. A little warm water in a bowl, sponge, towel, and the tincture of iodine if you have any. This simple list of requirements was passed on to the palpitating Ophelia, and in a commendably short time, scarcely more than sufficient indeed for Dr. Ollivant to stroll across to the window and, having ascertained that it was not inconveniently overlooked, commend the prospect. A tray containing them appeared. The doctor turned to Miss Tilehurst with his nicely discriminative lady-side manner. Now I shall ask you to withdraw for a few minutes, Miss Tilehurst. After I have attended to these superficial trifles, I shall put our man through a pretty thorough examination. I quite understand, replied Miss Tilehurst delicately, though of course she was yearning to be of some use. There is the bell by the mantelpiece. You will not hesitate to ring if there is the slightest? Now, my dear sir, directed Ollivant, as they were in the process of becoming alone, I think if you sit down there being a severe mahogany chair whose suitability consisted in its position, well out of the line of vision from the door, it will do nicely. Yes, we will have your coat off for a start. Capital. The door being now closed, and the window reasonably safe, especially as Ollivant, with his back that way, stood between it and his patient. The process of sponging away the traces of injury began, and this naturally brought the two heads close together. Okay? Dropped from the elder man's lips, but so circumspectly that one might have been in the room and still not heard the whisper or seen any facial movement. Okay. And you? Lapped it. But how the hell have you got yourself in this state? You weren't to have any bumps. It was to be all mental. Had a spill, actually? Nothing like. I simply thought it better. And then that little smay. Oh, well, can all that backwash? I'm here, aren't I? I see. Temperamental. Still, let me tell you, my young friend, it might easily have queered my bit of business. However, want anything doing? Knit. But How about the 2 extras? They're outside calculations. Dropped-ins. Man called Carrados, blind. Girl, Nora Melhush. They'll drift back after a while. They don't matter. Not so sure. She looks like being a snag. Sideline I hadn't thought to handle. Oh, huh? T was damned close about her, I must say. Neither Nickel nor I had an inkling. We're evidently some distance on, but where? As soon as I pick up, I shall be expected to do something. Well, that oughtn't to be difficult for you. It wouldn't if I knew where to leave off, but it's so infernally easy for me to overact the part in a case like that. Anyway, I shouldn't be sorry if Nora vanished. She's safe to be the sharp one. The old geezer wouldn't have tumbled to it if I'd turned up cross-eyed. I'll tell Jay, but we can hardly yank the girl out as well. It would raise fire and brimstone. I'm not asking you to, but that's how it stands. You can vamoose now. No question of having to get me out. We've arranged for messages. Righto. Closing down now. Yes, I think we'll be satisfied with that. This resumption of Dr. Ollivant's hearty, self-confident voice coincided with the completion of the use of sponge and towel and the application of iodine to his patient's scratches. Now suppose we move across to this couch for the next part of our job. I shall want a little more removed to get on with that. Then you can lie down quite comfortable, and it won't take long. You do understand? Oh, capital. Capital. He is with Jeffrey in the dining room now, and they don't expect to be very long. It will be such a relief for me to know that there is no internal complication to fear. I do hope that Nora has been attending to you, Mr. Carrados. Steadily, Miss Tilehurst, and I have been capably responding. One of the great advantages of eating is that it enables you to disguise emotion. To the cynical observation that speech is given us to conceal our thoughts, it might be added that eating and drinking enable us to hide our feelings. I think that is why food is an institution almost whenever human beings have anything to say to one another. A man has sufficient time to pull himself together under the excuse of even so simple an action as drinking from a cup of coffee. If he didn't, there'd be a spill, said Nora. In fact, there always is when it happens on the stage. The startled man blowing out his drink is one of the surest laugh-getters of the modern drama. Don't think me unfeeling, Miss Tilehurst, dear. It's only my way of keeping it up. I must be doing something or saying something very fast, and Mr. Carrados is considerately giving me a lead. Mr. Carrados, lead, dog, automatically responded some obscure process in Miss Tilehurst's sorely tried brain. Nora, Nipper. Nipper? I haven't seen him at all since I came. Why? Where is Nipper? No, that's it. He went with Jeffrey this afternoon, but he didn't come back with him. Your little terrier, eh? Remarked Mr. Carrados. Yes, Nipper may have involved a certain difficulty, mayn't he? He would never have left Jeffrey of his own free will, whatever it was that took place. He always recognized his footstep long before we even heard it, and ran out of the house to meet him. What can have happened to him? I think I can tell you that, volunteered Mr. Carrados quietly. You must be prepared for another shock, Miss Tilehurst, although, of course, it doesn't compare with the other. Nipper is no more. You mean dead? Yes, dead. I am sorry to have to tell you. He was found less than an hour ago in Burling Wood, and though his collar had seen removed, the man who found him recognized the dog as yours. But an hour ago. You were here then, Mr. Carrados. How could you possibly know of such a thing happening? For an answer, the blind man raised his hand in the direction of the house and nodded. Miss Tilehurst turned to see Ophelia coming along the path towards them. She carried something white in her bent arms, and the simple girl was crying. "Oh, Mum, it's poor Nipper. Mr. Batts, the keeper, has just brought him to the back door. He says he found him, not an hour ago, under a clump in Burling Wood, because his own dog knew there was something there, and as good as said so. I thought it sounded queer too, Mum, but Mr. Batts did say that his dog stood and pointed at the bush, and there, when he looked, was Nipper. At least he guessed it was yours through seeing it about with Mr. Jeffrey, although the collar was gone, so he brought it round as he thought you'd better know what had happened. Dead, killed, run over, I suppose, and then thrown aside to save any unpleasantness. "Yes, Mum, Mr. Bat said he reckoned it was one of them hemmed stink kettles on wheels, and if he had his way they'd pave the roads with broken bottles, 'stead of tarring them. And if you please, Mum." "Yes, Ophelia," said Miss Tilehurst, gently stroking dead Nipper and smiling sadly. "What is it?" "If you please, Mum," wailed Ophelia, bringing her resolution to the boiling point so that a rush of words welled over. "It wasn't true what I said just now about that there green dish and Nipper. It was me that broke it, not I.M. There," with obvious relief. "I hope he's heard me say it." "Oh, Ophelia." "Yes, Mum," acquiesced Ophelia to the pained tone of reproach, in penitent agreement. "Well, leave it here now and go back. There's nothing to be done by talking, and Dr. Ollivant may be wanting something more. And oh, Ophelia, ask Mr. Batts if he will kindly wait for a few minutes longer, as I would like to see him. Isn't it unfortunate?" she continued to the others. "It would be bad enough at any time, but coming just at this moment." "Poor doggy," said Nora, surrendering the form to Carrados, who had stretched out his hands for it. "I never thought about it, but I suppose we must all have been fond of old Nipper." "Yes, I'm sure you were," agreed Miss Tilehurst, "but I was thinking more of Geoffrey at the moment. He isn't one to make a fuss of his affections, but I know that, without becoming maudlin, as so many doggy people unfortunately do, he thought a great deal of his faithful little companion. He's sure to ask for him as soon as he begins to speak again, and I dread to think how it may upset him. Would it be better to tell him now so as to get it over, or not yet? What do you think?" "On the whole, I should say that it would perhaps be unnecessary to tell him," replied Mr. Carrados. "You mean until he asks?" "Exactly, until he asks. When he does, course, that will be another matter." "I expect you are quite right. Then perhaps we ought to bury the little body now. It would be dreadful if he should happen to come upon it without knowing. But I can't just now. We could hide it for the time. Somewhere, the tool shed," suggested Nora, seeing that the usually decisive Miss Tilehurst was becoming painfully uncertain. "Then Draycott could dig a grave when he next comes gardening, couldn't he?" "Yes, but Draycott only comes 2 days a week, you know, and he won't be here again until Wednesday. I don't know. In this weather, then why shouldn't Uncle and I get it done while we are only waiting? I can't go until I know what the doctor says." "Oh, but if he isn't." Nora began to flounder. "We cannot possibly go until we hear, no matter how long the doctor may be, Nora," reproved Mr. Carrados gravely. "No, of course we can't," accepted Nora, "and it will be such a relief to be doing something vigorous like digging. We shall find a spade, all right. Mayn't we as well, Miss Tilehurst?" "But your clothes, your shoes, my dear," protested the more experienced gardener. "It would simply ruin those flimsy leathers." "I will do the actual digging, Miss Tilehurst," undertook Carrados, and rather wanly, since only one thing in the world seemed to matter then, Miss Tilehurst stroked Nipper's chalk-white back for the last time and said it would be a weight off her mind if they really would undertake the disposal while Geoffrey was safely out of the way. "And the rough grass beyond the espalier would be the most suitable place, I think," she added. "Shall I run down and show you?" "I know where you mean quite well," replied Nora. "And I'm sure you're only worrying if you are away from here for a minute. We'll get on all right, never fear." Miss Tilehurst had not long to wait. In fact, she met Dr. Ollivant coming down the steps as she was making for the hall to take up a useless vigil outside the dining-room door, after she had stood for a moment absently following Nipper's last progress down the garden. On his side, there was no inducement for Ollivant to linger once he had played his part. He had now to cope his carefully built-up fabric, and when that was done, the sooner he made himself scarce the better. "Ah, Miss Tilehurst," he exclaimed, with a jauntiness appropriate to the character of the report he brought. "I think now that I can set your mind at rest completely." "Oh, doctor, completely," she said quickly. "Does that mean that he is really all right again? That he can speak and answer?" Dr. Ollivant made a deprecatory gesture and looked quizzically reproachful. "Well, no, perhaps not quite all that just yet," he admitted. "But what I meant was that you need have no fear. Absolutely no apprehension whatever as regards the future. I have gone thoroughly over our young friend in there. By the way, he seems quite content to sit quietly alone, and so you'd better let him, and he is definitely uninjured. With the exception of the trifling facial bruises that you have seen, he has not been touched. His condition is purely the result of mental disturbance. He has received a shock, to put it simply. We have just found out that our little dog that went with him has been killed and the body thrown aside. A man who knew the dog has kindly brought it here. Do you think? Very likely indeed. Nothing more probable, replied the doctor, looking extremely sagacious. These reckless drivers, full speed along a narrow, winding lane. No warning. Your nephew sees the inevitable a yard ahead. He hears the despairing death cry of his unfortunate dog and barely escapes by the merest chance himself, the luck of being flung into the hedge and clear of the rushing Moloch instead of into the road and beneath it. Yes, there we have the case in a nutshell, I think, Miss Tilehurst. Is it any wonder that he emerges from that hedge with his mind temporarily seared? Temporarily, doctor? You still think that he will get over it before very long, then? I don't think, my dear lady. I know. Such cases are, to use rather a vulgar boast, my speciality, and I can absolutely guarantee it. You will find that gradually the normal faculties will come back. Probably he will begin to write, very shakily and unrecognizable at first, when he wants to communicate with you. As we saw just now, he is more disposed to write than to speak when the occasion requires. I see. And when he does speak, will it be the same as with the writing, not coming back suddenly restored? All experience points that way. Semi-coherent speech at first. Stammering and broken, you understand, but sufficient to make himself understood and to indicate his requirements. You mustn't be disconcerted if the voice sounds rather strange to your ears at the start. It's only a matter of time, like the writing. I won't mind, I can assure you. And in about how long? Ah, that's more difficult to say. These cases vary, but I should expect that you will notice a material improvement within a few days, and in somewhere about a week you may have quite a surprising transformation. Quite surprising. That will not seem so very long. And is there absolutely nothing for me to do to help? No matter what, if it only contributes to his recovery ever so little. Nothing beyond what I have already indicated. Nothing active, that is to say, but a great deal passive. Let him have entirely his own way in what he wants to do. Don't seem to notice him. Don't watch him. In fact, look at him as little as possible. It's all a reminder that something is wrong, and reminding him of what has happened is the one thing that must be avoided. He'll make absurd mistakes at first, no doubt, not know his way about even in places where he is quite familiar, pick up things that don't concern him, and of course, fail to recognize his friends. Though as to that, I shouldn't make a point of having people in to meet him. Oh, certainly not. I should dislike it myself. And his business, doctor? We must apply, I suppose, for leave of absence now. Ah, his business, to be sure. In these charming rural surroundings, one forgets that there is such a thing as business. I shouldn't wonder. What does he do, by the way? He is in the office of the paper mills here. You may have noticed them as you drove by. It is where they make the Bank of England note paper. It appeared, however, that Dr. Ollivant had not noticed them as he drove in. Indeed, and this was the single flaw in the impression left by that delightful man. He did not seem to be aware that special paper was required for the issue of Bank of England notes, ever to have even heard of the celebrated Tapsfield Mills, or to have the least interest in the subject of the firm's importance. One point only caught his attention, and that was when Miss Tilehurst spoke of the responsibility of Geoffrey's position. Just so. Responsibility, he commented. That impression may persist. It is a curious fact, Miss Tilehurst, that a man's vocational claims are often the predominant subconscious impulse. It is quite on the cards that your nephew will set off on Monday morning in the usual way and turn up at the office. Let me see. Are you on pretty good terms with the important people down there? Oh, yes. I meet them all occasionally. They'd do anything to help us, I am sure. Very well. As this happens to be Saturday, it gives you a day's grace. I should go round and see the chiefs tomorrow. Tell them all about it and what I have said. If your nephew should go to the works, the very best thing would be to give him free rein to potter about and try to recall his routine. Of course, he can't do anything there at first, but the association of the place will be helpful. I see. Yes, I quite appreciate that, and I am sure that there will be no difficulty in arranging it. They are most considerate, and of course they value Geoffrey's services very highly. Oh, quite so. Naturally. Well, Miss Tilehurst, I think that is about all. But, Doctor, aren't we to do anything to discover the culprits? A harmless dog is killed, an inoffensive man's reason, if not his life, endangered. Surely someone ought to be called to account. Yes, not unnaturally. I thought of that, and then there arises just this difficulty. Do we put our patient's recovery or our own feelings first? I say our own feelings for whatever may have happened, and we cannot exclude, my dear lady, the possibility of contributory negligence. The last thing in your nephew's interest is to recall that disastrous occurrence. Once bring in the police and what is inevitably bound to follow. There will be calls and interrogations and cross-questionings as one wiseacre after another gets what he considers a clue, until the excellent chance that our patient has of making a quick recovery is blown to atoms. But of course it's for you to say, "No," replied Miss Tilehurst very decidedly. "Oh no, I could not allow that for a moment. We might make discreet inquiry for ourselves, but Geoffrey shall not be worried. Then I can confidently leave his future in your hands. And now I must see about my own interrupted progress. A trying afternoon for you, Miss Tilehurst, but he'll go on all right. He'll steadily improve, never fear." "If I don't fear, Dr. Ollivant, it is entirely due to you. I think you must have been sent direct from heaven." "Oh, I shouldn't exactly call it that," protested Ollivant modestly. "At all events, I have no idea of getting back there tonight. Then goodbye, Miss Tilehurst, or possibly au revoir. It occurs to me that I may be passing this way back in about a week's time." "Oh, would you?" "I should be so very glad. Only next time you must really let me accept it as a professional visit." "That quite relieves my mind about not saying anything to that dreadful locum meanwhile. No, Doctor. I am coming into the lane to see you off." "Oh, the others. My visitors, you know. Do you care to see them before you go, or—" "I hardly think it is necessary. We scarcely spoke. My apologies, if you don't mind, when you rejoin them." "Certainly I will. By the way, Mr. Carrados is particularly interested in crime and obscure cases. He has quite a unique reputation for a blind man, I understand. If he should happen to speak to me of what took place, an amateur sleuth, as I believe they are called, eh?" Dr. Ollivant relaxed to the extent of a grimace of good-humored, if contemptuous, amusement. Wonderful fellows, provided everything happens their way, if we are to believe the magazine story writers. Well, the less stir and talk there is in any quarter, the better for our patient. But I quite see, Miss Tilehurst, that it may be difficult for you. They passed by the little side gate into the lane, still talking. The soil beyond the espalier, fortunately, was light and easily dug. But, even so, Mr. Carrados, divested of his coat and with cuffs turned back, more than once bewailed his pliant good nature in taking on the energetic office. Alas, poor Nipper! A dog of infinite zest and understanding. 100 times hath he buried the bones of others here, and now we bury his pest on it, he declaimed between his efforts. This gravedigger business is ill-suited to the day, Nora. Why didn't you suggest the dog's cemetery in Hyde Park, where he could have been put away in style and to our material comfort? Probably because I didn't know of it. Is there such a place, really? Certainly there is, and a very singular institution, though I dare say it's full up now. Remind me when I am next showing you the sights of London, and I'll take you— Will this about do, quotha? Oh yes, I'm sure it's deep enough now. As you've had all the work so far, I'll do my share by filling it up again. Poor old Nipper. And that's the end of him. Uncle Max, was Nipper run over by a motor car, and Geoffrey nearly run over and frightened out of his senses? I am sure that's what she thinks, and it does look like that, doesn't it? Not altogether, Nora. The dog was killed by the single blow of a heavy blunt weapon. The man is more complicated. Oh, you mean that someone killed the poor little thing deliberately? But why should anyone? Why, Uncle? A great deal may turn on that. He might have attacked in defense, but there is an immeasurably subtler line of implication that is dangerously attractive. Yes? He could always recognize Geoffrey's step, you know, and like me, he had a nose that was fatal to deception. Oh, but that's no good, since Geoffrey would still be the same to Nipper. I mean, it brings us no nearer to what really happened, does it? Perhaps a little. Geoffrey was first chloroformed, I think. The hand that picked Nipper up to dispose of him had certainly touched chloroform just before. Drugged. Does that bring us nearer by taking us further away, I wonder? This, needless to say, was not very helpful to Nora, who was all for other people being explicit. That's very profound, I dare say, but I simply don't understand anything from it, and I feel that it's all getting rather horrible, like a forest in a nightmare, and whichever way I turn, I'm bound to get more and more lost in it. What is there to do, my wonderful uncle? Wait, he replied, and she was startled by the feeling, almost bitterness, in place of his usual tempered suavity. Wait for them to show their hand more plainly. That's a fine thing to have to recommend, isn't it, when just the one clue that may spell all the difference between failure and success is on the point of slipping through our fingers. The one clue. The Harley Street specialist who is so familiarly at home in an East End fence's den. Where is he making for when he goes from here? You want to know that, Uncle Max? It might ultimately lead us to the answer. Now it's too late to have a hope of following. If only your brother had been at home, I could have put him onto it with a fair chance of shadowing our ingratiating friend to the trysting place with his report of progress. Motorbike. He must make for the Stanbury Fork. Dark blue Lamartine. One could overhaul him. Yes, but Tom is somewhere among the Alps just now, and there's no one else in this fascinating Sleepy Hollow of yours that we could get in time, even if there is anyone at all who would do it. Oh, blow! Exclaimed Nora in sudden irrelevance. There's Miss Tilehurst. I suppose she wants me to do the polite by saying goodbye or something silly. Go on filling up, won't you, old dear? Back as soon as I can. And without offering the necessary opening for the proverbial word that is inserted edgeways, she flew up the garden, leaving Mr. Carrados still painfully reviewing the circumstances that were leading to the calamity of Ollivant's secure retirement. The engine of the car in the lane gave a few preliminary skirls as the blind man threw back the last spadeful of earth. Another minute passed, and then the sound grew constant. Nora had not yet returned, so presumably she had been pressed into remaining to grace the good fairy Ollivant's bouquet-strewn departure. Mr. Carrados had no wish to figure in the flourish, but as the measured drone of the unseen Lamartine traced its progress along the lane beyond the wall, he picked up his coat again and sauntered up the path with a passing thought of his usually scrupulous appearance. "Ah, Ophelia," he said, recognizing her presence as he neared the house, "you are the very person I'm wanting. Do you think you could bring a clothes-brush out and perhaps—" "You see the state I've got myself in, burying poor Nipper." "Why, to be sure, I will, sir," replied Ophelia, surprisingly varying her formula. "I'll trim you up like 1 o'clock if you don't mind waiting a couple of jiffies. I'm looking for the mistress now. That Mr. Batts doesn't half give me the shivers. He's in the kitchen there with his pocket full of ferrets, and they keep getting out, and the cat does nothing but put their backs up and swear at one another. Says he can't wait no longer. The keeper? Oh, he oughtn't to go until Miss Tilehurst has seen him. I think you'll find her just out in the lane there with Miss Melhuish. If you run across, I'll have a word with Mr. Batts myself meanwhile, and keep him until you come back. He should know a lot about trapping vermin." "Right you are," said Ophelia, with the easy manner which, we are told, is the universal hallmark of good breeding. "The missus may be there, but I don't know about Miss Nora. Not 2 minutes ago she went through the other gate like a streak of greased lightning, and if she isn't at Turnpenny Cross by now, she might be." "She went out," considered Mr. Carrados. "Now that's rather odd." But even as he stood, from the road beyond and then from the lane itself, there came a possible, if rather fantastic, answer to his deliberation. It approached as a crescendo hum, gathering into a husky roar as it swept by, and in less than 10 seconds the beat was faintly drumming the air in the direction of Stanbury Junction. For just a moment, a gauntleted hand had shown above the level of the wall, in a gesture that conveyed both hail and farewell. "Mr. Carrados, what on earth can it mean?" Miss Tilehurst was hastening back towards the house from the gate to meet her only remaining guest, who was reversing that process. "Did you see, bless us, I should say here, that was Nora, tearing like a wild thing down the lane on her brother's motorcycle. I wouldn't have recognized her, she was so got up, if she hadn't waved. And do you know, I actually believe that she was wearing Tom's leather trousers." Chapter 11. A mine is Countermined. Mr. Carrados's appearance at Orchard Close had been in the nature of a weekend visit, and on the Monday following Miss Tilehurst's eventful Saturday afternoon tea party, he returned to his own house in Richmond. So far as he was concerned, the circumstances of what might be called the Geoffrey Tilehurst case had progressed little beyond the elementary coincidental. Geoffrey had gone out for a ride and returned suffering from complicated loss of memory. At the same time, there had appeared on the scene the soi-disant Dr. Ollivant. Dr. Ollivant was either a medical man curiously in touch with Julian Juleby, that bizarre figure of exotic reputation, or else an impostor masquerading as a doctor. It would be easy to establish by the medical directory whether there was, so far as the current issue went, anyone of that name with an address in Harley Street, but the evidence would not be quite finally conclusive. Dr. Ollivant had, in fact, been faced with the alternative of personating a specialist who could be referred to at any time, or of inventing a fictitious one who might be less convincing but who would be more elusive. That he had returned to a sequestered house in an outer London suburb, as Nora had been able to establish, meant little or nothing yet. That house had still to be investigated. So far it was difficult to suggest what had necessitated Ollivant's function in Tapsfield. The result of his framed-up appearance at Brookcroft had only been to put about what any genuine doctor could have established. The measure of disguise suggested that he had been there before, or intended to go again, or else that there was a chance of encountering someone while on that lay who might recognize him in his fictitious character. Certainly he had gained a first-hand knowledge of the house and grounds. Was Mr. Carrados rating the incidentals too high, and this nothing but the prelude to a commonplace burglary? A coincidence is the intersection of two lines, neither of which need possess in itself the least significance. When three lines meet at the selfsame point of time or space, the laws of chance suggest the probability of some conformable agency. "I suppose this is getting frightfully complicated," once remarked an interested outsider for whom Mr. Carrados was investigating a case, when one baffling circumstance after another was brought to light as the quest proceeded. "On's quest proceeded." "Not at all," was his reply. "On the contrary, it is becoming transparently simple. One or two lines might establish nothing, but when a dozen or a score could be extended, it was inevitable that they must disclose a center of origin. The episode of Nipper's dispatch was just one of these detached pointers. In itself it went for little, but its line of direction might lead to something, and in any case it was the tertium quid suggesting that the other incidents were unlikely to be fortuitous. Nipper had been handled by someone who just before had been associated with chloroform. The dog had not been chloroformed itself, for, as Carrados had settled, the head was wholly free from any touch of contact. Mr. Batts was also eliminated as a possible conveyor when the opportunity offered. The supposition that Geoffrey had been chloroformed was a reasonable hypothesis at that stage of the disclosure. Had the dog been brought upon the scene 5 minutes before he was, the point could have been settled very naturally. But by the time that Mr. Carrados's nose had made him a present of that piece of information, all chance of such a test had been shattered, quite unintentionally as it happened, by Ollivant's effectual treatment of his patient's injuries. If Geoffrey Tilehurst, Dr. Ollivant, and Nipper were all connected by an impending theft from the Tapsfield mills, it should be possible to deduce, if not the actual plan in detail, at least a theory into which all the existing facts would fit, and no construction that did not reconcile all that had happened was worth exploring. Tilehurst was naturally the crux, for the parts played by the other two were obviously contingent to his function. Was it possible that this responsible mill employee had been laid out and doped, and was now existing in a mentally inert state by which he became an unconscious tool in the hands of those who had the key to his position? The basis was almost good enough to answer to the test, but Carrados knew of neither drug nor process that could be relied on to work satisfactorily in practice under such tenuous conditions, and although Julby might feasibly have access to some useful family hoodoo, it was scarcely an assumption on which to conduct a serious investigation. It would have been a simple enough move to warn the firm, but Max Carrados's interest lay in the phase of crime rather than in forestalling it, and on that score he had little tangible as yet to lay before a directorate of level-headed businessmen who would as likely as not regard him as an officious meddler. After all, what did it amount to? A dog had been run over through straying on the road. A man had received some sort of nervous shock that had upset his mental balance for the time being, and the Good Samaritan who had come to his aid had a voice which the caller thought he recognized as having heard in a second-hand shop some time before, and he might not be on the medical register. A curious tale with which to convey a serious warning that it all pointed to a sensational robbery. On the other hand, there was Scotland Yard, which would have lent a very attentive ear indeed, but it had always been the blind man's humor to take the official branch into his confidence after he had found out all he wanted, rather than in the course of that process. One other detail was not without its influence. On the Sunday afternoon, Mr. Carrados again went across to Brookcroft, and, somewhat to his amused chagrin, found that Miss Tilehurst did not consider it wise that her nephew should be submitted to the possible excitement of a meeting. Ollivant had played his delicate part commendably well, and although Nora flatly called it desertion of herself, of Geoffrey, and of the case, Uncle Max good-humoredly accepted the taunt, but provokingly declined to be either goaded or cajoled into upsetting his arrangements. "After all, there are two ends to every stick," he reminded her, "and it's quite on the cards for mine to be the one that next waggles. You did finely the other day, and it's going to be of very great use. But for heaven's sake, my dear, don't get yourself into any scrape following things up. Only if you do, remember that I'm the chap you've always got to fall back on." "I'm not going to promise anything after the perfectly fetid way you're running off," she retorted. "Still, it's pretty obvious that I shall stay here and do what I can for poor Geoffrey in the circumstances." It occurred to the hearer, who was accustomed to glean much of his knowledge from the infinitesimals of tone, that there was a spice of, "It is my duty and I will," in this praiseworthy resolve, which fell short of the ecstatic resolution of the Saturday Nora. It was an unwelcome suggestion, but was this frank, high-spirited niece of his becoming slightly calculating? Mr. Carrados was justified in his assumption that it was his end of the stick that might register the next movement, but it was Nora who supplied the action, and if the sudden and unannounced arrival of Miss Melhuish at the Turrets contained any element of surprise for him, his habitual imperturbability enabled him to pass it off with disarming lightness. "This is uncommonly nice of you, Nora," he said before she had had the chance to embark on any explanation. "I was just wondering what to do next. The dogs, cemetery, of course, as soon as we've had some sort of refreshment. I'm glad you've taken me at my word about it." "Don't," she begged, and immediately his face responded to the need of another sort of mettle. "Miss Tilehurst isn't here now. I came because I was frightened." "That's even nicer of you, my dear," he replied, and took a seat on the couch close to her. "I expect the pair of us can down it." "Uncle Max," she said with a childlike directness that put such courtesies aside, "did you know?" At this, every instinct in him threw up a guard. There was always the chance of giving something away by taking too much for granted. "Did I know?" he repeated, conscientiously searching his mind. "Surely, Nora, that's a little vague. Did I know what exactly?" "If you do know, there's no need to ask," she replied sharply. "It can refer to nothing else, that he is not Geoffrey." Possibly she had looked for an exclamation, either of incredulity or of assent, according to his knowledge, but Mr. Carrados merely continued to look pleasantly interested. I did not know. I could not really know, because I had never up to then met him. I could only admit that such a thing might be, although the chances were 1,000,000 to 1 against that explanation. So that is it, actually. How did you find out? I think I must have known all along, without knowing that I knew, if that doesn't sound too silly. You see, Uncle, it isn't anything to do with anything, being in love with a person, no matter how soppy it may sound to you in your wisdom. It's just a sort of itness to do with one another, and it won't work under any form of substitution. At first, when I missed something that ought to have been there, I thought that it was just a rather contemptible streak of disillusion, that Geoffrey should have been so terrified by anything that could have happened as to be scared into that condition. But of course, if Geoffrey really had been, it would have only made me care for him all the more. And then, prompted Carrados, for Nora seemed to be in danger of losing herself in retrospection. Something definite happened? I had seen Jeff him once or twice and tried to get him out of that awful apathy, but on each occasion he seemed to fight rather shy of me. Then yesterday I met him in the road. He'd been to the mill, I found, and he more or less had to walk with me unless he bolted for it. Do you mean that up to then you hadn't been close to him? I don't seem to have been, when I think it over, she assented. You know that on the Saturday I was with you all the time, and since then it's always been in the house where he likes to keep in the shade, and that poor dear tries to make everything go on as though nothing unusual had happened, and at the same time gets between him and anyone else who's there, like a troubled old hen with the last survivor of a brood of chickens. Yes, I think Ollivant must have been pretty word-perfect with his piece. I must find out where he was educated. Well, as I say, we walked along the road on the way back. He doesn't speak yet. He doesn't try to, but I knew from his aunt that he has written a few words once or twice, just as that man said he would begin by doing. So I thought I'd try that. Yes, encouraged Mr. Carrados. I suppose it must sound terribly sloshy to you, Uncle Max, faltered Nora. Never mind that, my dear. I have always understood that under the most sportswoman-like jumper, a tender heart might be beating. I just wrote, "Am I still the same to you, dear?" and gave him the piece of paper. He took it and seemed to read it in that dreadfully detached way he has towards everything, and then very slowly and shakily, all straight lines and angles, you know, he scrawled, "Dear, dearest," underneath the other. That was fairly satisfactory at all events. It indicated a sufficiently reciprocal superlativeness of feeling. The words didn't matter in the least. I only tell you exactly what took place for you to see, that I had a perfect opportunity of noticing. On the Friday, the day before everything happened, we had been playing tennis, and in some way Geoffrey jagged a fingernail so that it kept catching in his things whenever he touched it. You know how beastly that feels, and it was on the first finger of his right hand, so I took a little pair of nail scissors that I carry in my bag and filed down the corner of the nail for him until the notch was taken out and as smooth as ever. It was hardly anything, unless you looked for it, of course, but one corner of the nail was down close and quite unlike the rest, and as I watched him write, I found that I was looking at that fingertip, and suddenly it flashed on me that the nail I saw was just the same length all round, and it couldn't possibly be the one I had altered. Good, commented the blind man, coming to his feet and beginning to walk about the room and in and out among the furniture. That's the sort of thing that takes my eye. It could not possibly be. And it couldn't. As evidence, I don't suppose that it would be worth mentioning to a jury, who would be perfectly satisfied to convict a man who has been picked out of a dozen on the strength of a small brown mustache and a conspicuous limp, and yet it puts everything else behind it. Forgive me. For just a moment, I found myself groping among the background of my mind, trying to drag out a possibility that it might have been another finger or the other hand, although I knew perfectly well that it wasn't. Then I looked up and saw his face, and although every line and every feature was the same, I realized all at once that he wasn't in the least like Geoffrey. Did he see that you had guessed? I hardly know. I heard your voice saying, "Keep your wits about you and don't give anything away," and I pulled myself together. It was all over in a second or two, and I got away as soon as I could then, and that's the last I saw of him. Oh, Uncle Max, why ever didn't you tell me? How could I, child? I didn't know myself. I only took into consideration that it might be remotely possible. It was no good putting the idea into your head if it was a false scent, but I dropped a hint or two that might back you up if you struck that line on your own initiative. It was really too much to hope for. Consider, of all the hundreds of thousands of pairs who have been said to be as like as two peas, not one in 1,000 could really pass for another. And yet, how beautifully it rounds everything off as no other theory could: the presence and exact role of our providential medical friend, the behavior and deficiencies of the fictitious Tilehurst, and the necessary immolation of the unfortunate dog that couldn't have been hoodwinked by mere externals. That's all very well, and I have no doubt that it's frightfully intriguing and all that, said Nora with some impatience, but it doesn't happen to be the one thing that seems of any importance to me to be doing. Implying the real Geoffrey Tilehurst? Naturally. What else? Where is Geoffrey now, and what are they doing to him? At all events, they are scarcely likely to have harmed him. They took the trouble to drug him to bring off the coup with a minimum of violence. Probably he is being held somewhere until the business is through, when they will clear off and release him. Or leave him gagged and bound somewhere so that they may get a longer start. The tender mercies of this particular gang are not likely to be very fastidious, I take it? From what I know of the gentleman who is presumably acting as managing director of the firm, I shouldn't describe them as rabid humanitarians. He admitted, "The one thing you can rely on is that they won't do anything unnecessary that is palpably to their own disadvantage." "That's very consoling," she retorted, "isn't it? Well, Uncle Max, here I am. What do you propose to do to rescue Geoffrey before they happen to find it to their advantage to hold him up between themselves and a splash of CID bullets?" "I think you exaggerate the risk, my dear," he protested mildly. "Geoffrey is as likely as not to be very well treated wherever he is, and I dare wager that he'd be perfectly willing to stick it for a few more days, if that will mean our netting the whole gang with evidence that will convict them. Perhaps he would, Uncle Max, but we can't ask him that, and in the circumstances I've got to do what I consider the best thing for his interests. Get Geoffrey clear, and then asphyxiate the lot, and welcome." "But my child, if Geoffrey is to be got out at this immature stage, it blows the gaff completely. Half of the crowd will vanish, including all the worst, and we shall have no proof at all of the real depths of the conspiracy. Sorry, Uncle, I know how attractive that part of it is to you, but Geoffrey's safety is more important to me than unearthing a plot to bomb the Houses of Parliament." Of course, he hastened to assure her. "So it is to me, theoretically. The only point of difference between us is that I see the extreme desirability of doing both. Secure the offenders in the act, and Geoffrey's release automatically follows. It might. On the other hand, there might be one of those regrettable hitches where the experiment is perfectly successful, only they unfortunately fail to revive the subject. As it is, I have a certain amount of leeway to make up for assuming that Geoffrey had been thrown into a blue funk. Perhaps I shan't be quite so heroic about my own nerve until I've shown some." "Well, you made up a fair share when you got us that house in Maplewood Avenue, I should say," he reminded her. "A good deal may depend on what goes on there before we are through with it. I wanted to ask you about that. The house I followed Ollivant to. Have you found out anything yet?" "Nothing at all, for the sufficient reason that so far the action hasn't reached there. The first move must come from Tapsfield. Of course, if I had given Scotland Yard the tip, they would have picketed the place, but I saw no reason to make the Yard a present of the facts until I had a pretty complete case to gloat over them about. So that without letting it go out of my own hands, I could only cover your end. I may decide to let Inspector Beadle in sooner than I had intended now. This dual Tilehurst business considerably modifies the outlook. And apropos egad, that secluded old roomy house. Yes, it might be as well to." "Go on, Uncle Max," said Nora pleasantly. "I like to watch your exceptional mind at work. Apropos the disappearance of Geoffrey and that big old lonely house. You were saying?" "Saying, Nora, only that if one is to do any good there, it will be necessary, in due course, to get considerably more assistance." "Exactly what I was thinking as you spoke, dear. Both thoughts. I'm glad that there are points of the case where we have the same ideas. Don't think me presumptuous, Uncle, but it enables me to leave that part in your hands with every confidence." "My dear," said Mr. Carrados, bringing his involved perambulation to a close in front of her, "I feel in a way responsible for letting you into this, and no doubt that makes me seem fussy." "That's quite all right, Uncle," replied Nora cheerfully. "Mother would be ever so much obliged to you, I'm sure. If you, at the other end, happen to see her before I do again, I know that you'll be able to satisfy her that I'm not likely to get into mischief." "I don't doubt that I shall," he agreed, with a rueful acceptance of the position. "I only wish I could satisfy myself as well while I'm about it. But you aren't going already?" "Yes." "It is rather a disappointment, isn't it? But I take it that the ordinary social amenities are suspended for the nonce, whatever a nonce may be, and you've given me what may be rather a bright idea. Then in return, perhaps you will give me just an ordinary one. As to what it's your intention to be up to now, well, I don't quite know yet, or of course I should value your advice immensely. You see, Uncle Max, I rather take after you in one thing that I've noticed about your work. We both like to keep an open mind and to be decided by the requirements of the moment. And you are determined to tell me nothing. There's nothing really to tell. But isn't there a sort of right by first discovery? And, well, in a way I was the one to discover that house that he went to, wasn't I?" "It seems to me, Juleby," said Mr. Nicol, picking his words with the air of elegant disdain which had the double effect of sometimes making the commonplace sound almost impressive and of always making the cripple secretly hate him rather more than before, "it seems to me definitely to put the final lid on. If you take my advice, you'll cut your losses, call everything off, and get valet out of the way so as to red herring the trail before they sight you." "If I took your advice, Nicol, and chaps like you, I should be pushing a little truck about Limehouse selling firewood," replied Mr. Juleby. "Your trouble is that you see blue whenever you hear a whistle round the corner. This is going through whatever happens." "Amiable lunatic," murmured Nicol, turning again to the cipher message. There were 4 of them present in Mr. Julby's back office, behind the shop in Paget Street, and to judge by their morose looks, things were becoming none too rosy for the Tapsfield undertaking. Julby himself swelled and fumed in a venomous mood against gods, men, and devils. Nicol stretched his "I told you so" pose to its most offensive power, and the other 2, mere hirelings of crime on the dealer's long waiting list, bit their lips gloomily and exchanged looks of mutual support and mutual instigation. "That's all very well, Governor, whatever happens," said the more assertive of the 2 at this grandiose challenge. "But what about we blokes as'll be left in it? You'll take bleedin'. Good care to have plenty of time to do a guy when the fuse blows out, but it'll find Snooky and me stuck in a jam all right, and no one's going to cut across and drop the signal." "And how am I going to do a guy, you foolish fellow, if it comes to wrong?" demanded Mr. Julby, glowering heavily. "You talk as if I could hop, skip, and jump and leave everything behind me. Aren't I chained to the ground like what none of you aren't? Aren't I so tied to my house and shop here where I have thousands of pounds worth of stuff? Though, mind you, I can't sell it. That I should starve if I left them behind me. Was there ever such monkey chatter?" "All the same, Governor, what he says is right," put in the other, anxious to back up his friend now that the first step had been taken. "You're here, aren't you, if it comes to a bunk, but we're there. Cut off, so to speak, and if anything slips, like what that bloke makes out in his letter, we shan't have half an earthly. Any reasonable risk's neither here nor there, Governor, but it's no use blinkin' a blinkin' moral. If it go wrong, if something slip, is that a cop? Mammy, come and give Bertie his dummy," bellowed Julby, wrought almost to frenzy by the renewed thwarting of his cherished plans. "Suffering Jesus! Am I the only one in the crowd with guts enough to cross a road in the dark or to walk past a police station in the daylight? Isn't this the chance of a lifetime? Have either of you ever made a couple of quids at once in your puff before? Pinching goods from the back of delivery vans and smooching let-off empty houses? And now in less than a week you'll have enough to keep you in beer to the end of your natural. Doesn't that make you brave enough to face even a chained bulldog? That's right enough, Governor, and if there wasn't— Oh, my God! I'm going out to breathe the pure air of Shadwell, exclaimed Mr. Nickel, flinging himself from his chair in an access of fastidious irritation. It's like being in a gory squirrel cage, with you three going round and getting nowhere. How is there anywhere to get but here? Demanded Juleby with stubborn insistence. It's going on just as ever, don't I tell you, Nickel? Comrade Blonsky want look-see, announced One Chow stolidly. As usual, he gave the impression of knowing exactly what was going on without being there to see it, and although the ingenuity of his observation posts discounted the latter part of the assumption, the former was probably correct enough. All right, replied his master, with a painfully uncouth gesture of resignation, for the deputy was the last person he could have wished to have to deal with then, and he was feeling very tired. Make Showglad come in. Thank heaven even for Bronsky, remarked Nickel, pausing in his doorward progress. Time brings strange revenges. If Wancho gave the impression of knowing everything without the least interest in what it was, Mr. Bronsky's bearing was plainly that of a man who had been kept too long in the dark and was now determined to receive his proper meed of due attention. The glossy attire might be slightly less resplendent than when he first appeared, but his entrance had lost nothing of its thick-skinned suggestion that he was there to push his way in and to the front whether he was welcome or unwanted. The kiss of fraternal love had no longer any place in his greeting. In fact, the greeting itself was reduced to the most perfunctory word and nod in the host's direction. Social distinctions were indicated by entirely ignoring the presence of both Nickel and the other two worthies. "What is this which I hear of things going not well, Juleby?" he demanded, coming to the point at once. "I was definitely to have been keep informed of any of the sort happening." Comrade, sorry that I didn't notice you had come in. Forgive the apparent discourtesy," intervened Nickel in his most offensive vein of politeness. "Well, I can only imagine that the omission has been through some underling mistaking his instructions, though possibly our not hearing anything detailed ourselves until now may have had something to do with the unfortunate position." "PSS's, TSS's," fumed Mr. Bronsky, recognizing that he was at a disadvantage in this sort of medium. He accordingly took off his hat and put it on again, sat down at the table with his back towards as many of those present as possible, and began to drum loudly and persistently with his fingers. "I beg your pardon?" remarked Nickel, raising his eyebrows. "I didn't quite catch your remark, but as Mr. Bronsky merely drummed with increased vigor, what is sometimes called an awkward pause was all that resulted from this brief passage. "You have the letter, Nickel," said Mr. Juleby with conspicuous mildness. He seemed to have exhausted all his fighting spirit. "Let him hear what Valet says about it." "It is a message in code," explained Nickel, shelving for the time being the acuter symptoms of resentment. "Juleby here sees in it a promising augury of success. Everyone else thinks it means that if we don't get out now, we stand an excellent chance of getting about 7 years a little later. However, I'll decode the essential part, and then you can decide which view appeals to you the more." "How has this message you say is from Valet come?" demanded Mr. Bronsky, with all the importance of one propounding something really vital. "What the hell does that matter, comrade?" replied Nickel. "Naturally, we have our channels, and this has come in quite the usual manner, if you think, but perhaps you would raise that valuable point after I have finished. Valet writes, I spotted the girl N. By that he means a Nora Melhuish who lives near, to be the chief danger from the beginning. She is mixed up with a man called Max Carrados, who is evidently taking a hand in the game, though I don't know yet exactly in what direction. 10,000 million tevils, exclaimed Mr. Bronsky, springing to his feet and glaring wildly round at each one in turn. "What did I tell you, Juleby?" Max Carrados again, "and you would have it that he came to buy some of your junk rubbish. He was here that day I come, and now he appear on the scene there. And you believe that all he wants are foreign stamps, or is it dried ferns to stick into an album? "Oh, goddamn, nobody can say I never warn you." "Quite so," commented Nickel. "Well, to resume the tale, today something missed a cog, and whatever it was N is now all but satisfied that GT is not the authentic." "She smell a rat?" propounded Mr. Bronsky. "We think he must mean that," assented Nickel with suspicious gravity. "Unless you can cut N off before she spreads. The big noise may happen any minute, and even then, I shall have to make some quick tricks to get clear. This is a pity, because in all other directions it was going good, and I was fixing for next Saturday, when there will be a full stock and conditions easy." "There you have it, Bronsky. You shall do as you likes, but I am done with it," declared the comrade without a shade of hesitation. "If it is as he says, that this girl knows and is about there, why in name of thunder did you not have her taken care of before this happened?" "Well, you see, Bronsky, for one thing, we aren't in Bolivia here, not even in Chicago. People will talk so in the country, especially if it's a young girl, that we might just as well have floodlit the village while we were about it." "All the same, Mr. Bronsky's in the right," chimed in one of the others. "You must either put this here girl away or else call off the whole business." "Precisely," agreed Nickel. "And as we can't do that, it is called off in the general interest." "It is not called off," spat out Juleby, gathering himself together in a last stand for the glorious hazard that in the course of weeks had become his passionate obsession. "It has not changed 1 line, 1 inch, 1 minute. All this talk about recognizing and risk and whatnot else is nothings but funk and fiddle. It is clear the girl did not be sure, or she would have said so out, and Valet must have gone then. If she think there is something queer, she is only puzzled what it is, and days will go while she is making up her mind what has happened. I tell you, these big jobs always has their touch and go, and it is the side that does not get the jumps that comes away with the parcel. Howsoever, I cannot be in it now it has come to this," declared Mr. Bronsky, siding with the majority with characteristic firmness. "It would bring ill name with commission. After all, Juleby, this is only detail, in the one matter of paper. There will yet be other ways." "There are no other ways," retorted the other harshly. "It was a perfect scheme, and everything hung together. It still is, and I'll carry it through myself and be damned to your wet trousers. Remember, Nickel, this was to be in my hands, and so long as Valet stays there—" "Valet will not stay there after today," Nickel interrupted coldly. "It's sheer madness to let him stay and be taken like a rabbit. I got him there, and I'll make it my job to get him away tonight. So put that in those dry trousers of yours, Mr. Juleby, and sit on it." "You are all against me, so, and it would have been the most terrific smash," muttered the cripple, falling back into his chair, and seeming to grow less before their eyes as the realization of failure closed in upon him. "You may as well go away now. I do not want you." "Well, Governor, what else could you expect?" genially put in one of the hirelings, good-naturedly hoping to impart a tinge of cheerfulness to the general leave-taking. "Come to look at it as a reasonable man. Blimey, hadn't you better see what the perishing blighter wants before he cracks the ruddy contrivance?" Juleby turned listlessly towards the telephone on his desk. He did not appear to have noticed the calls up to then, and with his slow, elaborate movements got the receiver to his ear. "What?" they heard him say, and above the top of the desk, caught by the intensity of that one word, they saw his face change as he listened, and the lethargy drop from it in such a startling fashion that all four stiffened where they stood, frankly waiting for dropped crumbs of enlightenment. "Yes, yes, yes, of course she will. Go easy and notice nothing. Here, hold on a minute, though. I want you to repeat what you've just said to Mr. Nickel here. Nickel, get this slick and tell them what it means now." "My everlasting Lincoln and Bennett," faltered Nickel, after he had complied, listened for a moment, and then hung up the receiver. This is really one beyond the limit. George Larch says that Eliza there has suddenly gone sick and sent a cousin in her place to carry on until she gets over it." Go on, blared Juleby, swelling and gasping in his chair as Nickel paused and looked round to gather their attention for his dramatic climax. "Tell them what he said then. The cousin is Nora Melhuish from Tapsfield. Soapy recognized her for a cert, and now she's walked in of her own free will, and all we have to do is to shut the door and keep her." "No need to call it off, you see," croaked Mr. Julby, enjoying his little triumph quite good-naturedly. "It still goes on, eh, Nickel?" "Why the hell not?" replied Nickel, with a shrug that might mean anything. "Julby, I really begin to think that you must be under divine protection. By divine, in your case, of course, I refer to the devil." Chapter 12. The stage is set. "George, dear," said Mrs. Larch as her husband put his head in at the door of the dining room to see what was going on there, "do come in for a minute or two and make it a bit human." "Why, certainly. What is it, old girl?" he inquired, amiably complying. "It isn't anything particular," she confessed. "Only this place. It's like a bloody prison." "Well, for the matter of that, it is one," he replied, still naively pained to hear Cora swear, even as it always came to him as a faint shock to see her drink gin and water. "That young fellow down there? Oh, don't talk about it," she said with a deprecatory shudder. "The way one thing's led to another till we're mixed up in raids and kidnappings and bullshit plots. Thank goodness we've nothing to do with what goes on down below. Let his chinks and dagos do his dirty dungeon work if he wants it done, I say. It's not what we're paid for. Nothing was said to you about keeping anyone shut up in a cellar when you took it on to come here, was it, George?" "Not a thing. There was to be more room, and it would be safer in a new place for a week or two. That was all I ever heard. I don't like it any more than you do, Cora, but there seems nothing for it now we're here but to hang on for the time and chance it." "You may well say chance it, lad. From what I see and what I hear, it seems to be getting a pretty near thing which side touches down first. But the old geezer's dead set on going through whatever turns up, and God knows that if it comes to a general bunk, he's bound to be the hindmost. Except that he'd throw everyone else out to the wolves to make time to do a getaway," George amended. "He's always been very lucky at that so far, has Julby." "Lucky? He has nigger's own luck, if you ask me about it. This thing was absolutely down on the rim over what Natty Nora had spotted up there, and then, lo and behold, if my lady doesn't coolly walk in to rescue her boy, for all the world like Glory Leroy in a Wild West three-reeler, that gives you the laugh, doesn't it? As if she could have put it across the cat that she was Eliza's cousin. Well, she could have put it across me, for that matter, if Dodger, who'd seen her up there, didn't happen to call round to do with the business," admitted George simply. "All these Finches seem to get themselves up in the same way nowadays, till I can't tell one sort of tart from another. But I suppose there's something you go by." "There's certainly something I can tell Nora Melhuish by from any cousin Eliza Higgs is likely to have, let alone one who'd be willing to come round here to carry on while Eliza was molting. All the same, it's none too pleasant for me. I'm used to Elizas, I understand their little ways, and if they don't understand mine, they pretty soon get to. But this Hilda Kelly, as she calls herself, knows just how things should be properly done, and that puts me at a disadvantage. Now, would you say that those chairs ought to be left up to the table between meals, George, or pushed back? And should the cruet be kept on the sideboard or put away in the cupboard?" "I'm blessed if I know." "I'm damned if I do either. But what does it matter?" "It doesn't. That's just the silly part of it. Running the place for a crowd of crooks and roughnecks. But she would know, and if it's not done a la Ritz, she'd put it right after me and make me feel a mutt. Wouldn't say anything, of course, just show me how it should be." "Well, it can't be for long now," suggested George soothingly. "After this, we'll—" "And then there's another thing," volubly continued Mrs. Larch, to whom the relief of possessing George's ear was scarcely less of a luxury than in the rag-and-bone shop days, and I like it rather less than all the other. "She's not to be out of my sight for so much as a tick, if you please, unless I pass her on to that half-baked chink. And all the time, I'm not so sure that someone else isn't told off to keep an eye on me. And perhaps on you too, George, for that matter." "They're welcome," said George with a proud consciousness of innocence. "What I say I'll do, I do. Julby knows well enough that I've never double-crossed anyone. At all events, we can go in and out, and that's more than Hilda Kelly is to be allowed to. Mustn't answer the door, mustn't touch the telephone, mustn't stir out of the house. I ask you now, George, What's likely to be the end of this sort of thing when her people get the wind-up? And if the cops begin to take notice, what does it look like on a night like this, when everyone else is sitting in their shirt sleeves with the windows wide open, and all these are shut up as if we expected a siege? Well, I ask you. At this, George looked dutifully about, and with a wise shake of the head, admitted that from this point of view it might certainly strike the unprejudiced outsider as, quote, a bit rummy. The place was the dining room of the old-fashioned, well-retired house in Maplewood Avenue, a spacious, heavily furnished apartment, sufficiently well lit by a single cluster electrolier, but with its windows, although they were overlooked from nowhere but its own secluded grounds, not only all scrupulously closed on that torrid summer night, but with the curtains drawn and shuttered. It had been a simple enough matter to keep Geoffrey Tilehurst secure without any elaborate precautions. A cellar, closed by a substantial oak door, and a man deprived of everything faintly resembling a tool could be thrust in and safely left to his own devices. But in Nora's case, the fiction of liberty was outwardly kept up, and though from the moment of her quixotic intrusion she was shadowed at every step, and had not the remotest chance of slipping away if she repented of her boldness, she was even yet unable to decide whether her identity had been discovered, or whether the spying and restraint were not merely commonplace details of this very queer household. "One thing," added George, after the peculiarities of the situation had been sufficiently admitted, "it's going to be the last time I'm mixed up in what isn't strictly on the level. If we get clear this once with anything like tidy old girl, it'll be that little cottage with the pigs and poultry for a moral." "Oh, my dear lad, that cottage!" exclaimed Mrs. Larch, somewhere between laughing and tears. "I wonder how many times we've paid a pretty price for it already." And then on a common impulse, this curiously simple pair of habitual criminals were in each other's arms, and exchanging fond kisses for all the world like honest lovers. "Hello, turtle doves," remarked Nickel, stumbling in upon this idyll and accepting it with saving coolness. "Seen anything of Toady since dinner?" He was in his own sanctuary about 5 minutes ago, with that latest Alsatian bullshit. "Arranging for the end of the world, I suppose." "Did you want him?" "No, it can wait. It's rather amusing, you know." "I'll tell you the very latest." "If it's one of your funny stories, Mr. Nickel," interposed George rather hastily, "perhaps we'd better go." "No, that's all right," said Nickel with a comprehensive smile. "This is something that really happened just now, not what the barmaid said about the bathing suit to the bishop. I was going across the triangle down there, and who should I run into but our interesting invalid, Eliza Higgs, making her way towards the Rialto Picture House, with an equally young lady friend, both very superbly dressed for the occasion. "Well, I never," contributed Mrs. Larch. "Oh yes, I assure you." Jewels flashed and silk garments rustled. Well, seeing that further disguise was useless, Eliza capitulated, and at the inducement of a strawberry ice, supplemented, may I perhaps say, by the attraction of my society, permitted herself and friend to be lured into Cushing's Comfy Corner Cafe, where under skillful innuendo she broke down at her third Sunday and gave away the whole transaction. "She would," was Mrs. Larch's tart comment. "That's Eliza Higgs all over." "Oh well, we mustn't be too harsh." The young lady who dropped down on Eliza from the clouds, she'd evidently been watching for the chance, assured her that it was all a joke. In fact, that she'd made a bet she could act as a servant for a week in a strange house without anything being spotted. Then she offered Eliza 5 Bradberries, and what she was wearing at the time to cooperate, and Eliza, we may imagine, simply leapt at it. "It was a mean thing to give it away, though," remarked George severely, "after taking the money." Possibly Eliza misunderstood some of the facts. From what she dropped, apropos of what I had said, I gathered that she may have assumed that I was in the secret, on Hilda Kelly's side, from the start, admitted Nickel glibly. However, it didn't really matter either way. We knew pretty well how it stood already. Still, I think that Hilda might have hit on something better in the way of a fairy tale than what she did, speculated Mrs. Larch. "She seems quite a sharp girl in general." "Oh, I don't know," maintained Nickel impartially. Of course, since it tore, one's inclined to say that. But as things stood, what likelier tale could she put up at short notice? She might have got away with it, too, if it hadn't been, "Oh, all right, I'll take it." The interruption was a telephone call, and Nickel crossed over to the small table by the door, while the other two, the subject of Eliza talked out, waited to hear if there was any new development. Most of the calls that came were dead matter, for in the directory their number still appeared against the name of the former tenant, and less than a dozen intimates were in a position to get through to them. "It's Soapy, talking from somewhere down there," rapped out Nickel, covering the mouthpiece as he spoke back into the room. "Get Juleby if you can, one of you." Mrs. Larch nodded to George and hurried out. But Juleby's progress was slow, even on the level, and this entailed a flight of stairs, or possibly the Alsatian Bolshie was difficult to get away from. At all events, the conversation was over, and the receiver hung up again before the cripple dragged his trailing feet through the doorway. "What's this?" he said, the quickened beat of his throat betraying the stress of his exertion. "Is Dodger there speaking?" "He was," replied Nickel, "but he's gone. He seemed to be pressed for time, and I gathered that telephoning at all was rather risky." "Well, where was he talking from?" "God knows," said Nickel with a shrug. "Some wayside shrine, one would imagine. He is scarcely likely to have rung us up from the village pub, and in any case, there's no idea of calling on him from our end." "Well, what was it?" "He says it's all right for Saturday still. Nora M. doesn't seem to have done any harm so far, but he's getting jumpy about that fellow Carrados. He can't make out what's going on in that direction, but he wishes you could do something, that's all." "Oh, it is it? That's quite satisfactory, isn't it, Nickel? And he's getting jumpy about Max Carrados, is he? Strange that I'm the only one who never seems to get jumpy, isn't it? I suppose it has something to do with my physical peculiarities, for even as a boy I don't remember ever to have gone in much for jumping. Well, as regards Mr. Carrados, I have already arranged, as he suggests, to do something." "The deuce you have," said Nickel, staring his curiosity. "How is it to be wangled?" "All in good time, my friend. You won't be left out of the performance. Now go down and help One Chow and Jules to get things ready. They know what will be needed. And you bring Hilda up to me here, Mrs. Larch. I want to have a little quiet talk with my new maidservant." He waited until they had gone, and then looked significantly at Mr. Larch. "You understand all right, don't you, George?" "Oh, yes. I understand all right, Mr. Juleby," replied Larch in his transparent way. "And so long as it doesn't go actually to extremes—" "It shan't go actually to extremes, George." Mr. Juleby's voice sounded positively sympathetic. "I know that it may have to be cut rather fine, and stretched rather far at a pinch, of course, Mr. Juleby. That's in the nature of the business we are on. But I rely on you to give me the nod in time to get Cora clear off whatever happens. I can take my own whack as it comes, as I always have done." "Of course, George, of course. Women and children first. That's what the Bible says, isn't it? But not extremes on any account, eh? Well, well. You know what I mean well enough, Mr. Juleby. I mean bloodshed. I never have." "Here is Hilda, sir," announced Mrs. Larch, reappearing at the door. "You said you wanted to see her." To be sure, assented Juleby, plainly in his most benevolent mood. "And you two had better stay as well, now you are here. One can't be too careful, I understand, in dealing with emotional young females." "As you please, sir," replied Mrs. Larch, remaining between Nora and the door, while George, painfully wishing that he could be away at the more congenial occupation of forging banknotes, dropped discreetly further into the background. "So you are our new help, Hilda Kelly, eh, girl?" "Yes, sir," she answered rather feebly. It was the first time Nora had encountered Juleby face to face, and at the sight of his monstrous swelling infirmities she realized with a tremor of dismay that unless she could fight it down she might suddenly become faint or sick or something discreditably weak if the ordeal went much further. "And Miss Nora Melhuish of Orchard Close, Tapsfield also," continued her employer. Well, well, as Nora found herself unable to combat this thrust in her agitated plight, there's no great harm in having two different sets of names, and nearly all of our aristocracy have at least 2 separate addresses. Some of the most illustrious characters in history have found it convenient to change their identity from time to time. I have myself, and I dare say that Mr. Larch there has been described as alias this or alias that on certain state occasions. I don't see what my private affairs have to do with my employment here so long as I do the work, she managed to retort, hoping to be let off further questioning on this tacit admission. Very reasonably put, conceded Mr. Juleby, still pleasantly tickled by what was going on. And that brings me to another matter. Hearing that your cousin Eliza was feeling indisposed, you came here to take her place so that we should not be inconvenienced, didn't you? Very thoughtful and considerate indeed, so different from what one usually hears of the domestic servant classes. If you don't mind, I should like to get on with my work, sir, she put in as unconcernedly as she could. All this has nothing to do with my duties. Your work, eh? Replied Juleby, his mood suffering a remarkable transition as he proceeded. Why, yes, of course, that's what you're here for, isn't it? But part of your duties, properly considered, consists in taking instructions and answering your employer's questions and so on, eh, doesn't it? Well, Miss Hilda Nora Kelly Melhuish, in the short time that you have been here among us, have you discovered anything unusual or irregular in the conduct of this establishment? Then, as she stood irresolutely dumb at this, the cripple unexpectedly swung one of his wooden props and brought it down with a terrifying crash on the bare table lying between them. Answer me, girl, have you? No, sir, she protested faintly. You haven't, eh? Then let me tell you that your eyesight is very little better than your Uncle Max's, Hilda Nora. You must have made very poor use of your opportunities here, for you may as well know now our business consists in imitating the paper currency of certain foreign countries, countries unfriendly to England and more or less actually at war with us, if the truth was known. It's a political business, but nonetheless it's technically illegal, and so if it got about, we should all get into trouble. You follow that? Well, I suppose it's forgery in fact, she replied. Forgery? What do you know about forgery, girl? If I sign my own name on a telegram, it may happen to be forgery in point of law. Think of that. But these are banknotes, you say. Well, what does it matter after all? Suggested Mrs. Larch on a note of persuasion. I mean to say, there's nothing really wrong about imitating things like that. It's only that they've made laws about it. It isn't as though you hurt anyone or did them out of something, which I certainly wouldn't hold with. It stands to reason that one banknote's as good as another so long as people only think so. At least George's are. In fact, they're better than the real ones if it comes to that. I often say it's the people who go kicking up a fuss when they find that they've been slipped a soft one who deserve to be put in the cart. Why can't they pass it on quietly to someone else, and then no one would be a penny the worse off? Well, it seems rather queer, protested Nora, beginning to be a little reassured by the trend of the conversation. Never mind what it seems. I didn't have you up to listen to what you think, but to tell you what to do, retorted Mr. Juleby, taking over the conversation. No doubt you thought you were very clever to get in here, didn't you? Well, we thought we were even cleverer to get you, so it wasn't very difficult, you see. Now your Uncle Max Carrados has been interesting himself in our affairs much more than is good for him during the last few days. You say that you have noticed nothing going on wrong here, so why not tell him that and persuade him to drop it? Eh? Eh? It sounded too good to be true. All she would have to do would be to... Why, certainly. I'll go at once and tell him that I've seen nothing at all wrong here. You will, eh? Very good. But you won't have the trouble of going. He may be here any minute now. Max Carrados here, she exclaimed. What is he coming here for? It would appear that you wrote and begged him to come at once, deliberately replied Mr. Juleby, and looking at his face, which she had avoided doing to the extent of her power, the girl suddenly knew that the thing before her was crudely and inhumanly evil. He was without pity, beyond restraint, and impervious to remorse. All the time he had been playing with her fears and enjoying the thought of the worst terrors he yet had in store for her. Oddly, the revelation helped her. The message was rather ambiguously worded, he continued with meaning, but it suggested a good excuse for him to call, and it was sufficiently, shall I say, disturbing, to make sure that he'd be a little anxious. "Oh yes, he will come all right. In fact, I can assure you that he is on his way now." "So you forged my writing also. It's not only banknotes, it seems. And you think that Max Carrados will walk into a trap like that, or that I would do anything but tell him the whole truth the minute I see him? The whole truth, so far as you are concerned, is that you have found nothing wrong going on here," he reminded her. "Convince him of that, and all will be well for both of you. The little matter of our private activities that I mentioned just now was strictly confidential, and you had much better dismiss it entirely from your mind." "Yes, why should you have mentioned it at all?" she asked suspiciously. "Why need you?" "I needn't, but I want you to understand that we really mean serious business, and that having very heavy risks to face, we aren't going to stick at anything." "You mean that I should league myself with you in trying to deceive Mr. Carrados and the authorities? Is it likely?" "I think it is quite likely when you have considered a little, so likely that you'll strain every nerve and try every artifice in your power to do it. You are very young to meet with an accident, Nora Kelly, and it would hardly be a pleasant thought that you had drawn Max Carrados into a trap with you." "Ah, I fancy that must signify our myopic friend's arrival." That had been the resounding clamor of an ancient bell somewhere below, for, side by side with its electric lights and telephone, the venerable mansion still retained the campanological features of its Victorian prime. Mrs. Larch exchanged glances with her employer, and significantly withdrew. These details were not lost on Nora, as indeed they were intended not to be, but surely her sagacious Uncle Max could be trusted not to be taken in by a ruse so transparent. "It's no good, Mr. Juleby," she challenged. "You think that you can frighten me with silly talk like that? You seem to forget that we are in London. Why, I have only to scream out to bring half a dozen policemen in, and I am quite sure that Max Carrados won't walk in here without making it certain that if he doesn't soon come out again, the CID will smash down the door if need be to find out what has happened. I know him well enough for that. People don't scream out here, Hilda Nora," he replied, and his level assurance struck her coldly. "If they did, nobody outside would hear them." "It's no good talking like that," confirmed George Larch. "He won't be given the opportunity to arrange anything. He won't even know where he is coming. The person who gives him the note will deliver it when he's alone, and he must come at once and be guided here if he is to come. No, Miss Melhuish, if Max Carrados does come here, nothing but your doing exactly as we tell you will get either of you out again. And that's the best advice you'll have in this house." "You hear what he says," directed Juleby. "That's the moderate view of the situation. Ah, here's Mrs. Larch coming back. Now we shall know just how we stand." "A Mr. Carrados is below, sir," reported Mrs. Larch, as indifferently as she might have announced the vicar calling. "He says he would like to speak with the young person employed here, if it's convenient. Ask him to wait a few minutes, and be sure to see that he has something to amuse himself with. Now, girl, you haven't much time to make up your mind. Which is it to be?" "Just whatever I like," retorted Nora. "You can't bluff me into anything, and I fancy that Max Carrados will be able to take care of himself if he's come here. That's all." "All, is it?" snarled Juleby, beginning to display the familiar symptoms of his ire. "Oh no, not quite all yet, I think, Nora Hilda. Just open that door, George, and let's see if we can't find another argument why she should listen to reason." The door thus indicated was the second one in the room, hitherto unused and not yet mentioned. It led into a small antechamber and so out again onto a passage, and the stairs, this having been in the house's ampler days either a dressing room or a service pantry, as the conditions called for. This was the door George Larch now crossed over to and threw open, and in the pause between the action and anything more happening, a dreadful fear began to close in round Nora's heart, while her knees grew as flimsy as stubble. What would emerge from that darkened room to confront her? "Geoffrey," was wrung from her lips as a figure, urged on by someone behind, stumbled into the light. "Oh, my dear, how terrible you look. What are they doing to you?" Geoffrey Tilehurst stood cowering and blinking in the unaccustomed glare, but he seemed to make no effort to reply, nor did he respond to her instinctive gesture of compassion. Then, as he came further into the room, pushed forward by one Chow, She understood. He was gagged and his hands tied behind him. "What's this, Wan Chao?" demanded Julby, as though mildly surprised. "Who ordered like so fashion?" "Make much noise," indifferently replied Wan Chao. "Tali shall do, do." "In that case, it would appear to be his own fault," approved Julby coolly. "Guests must conform to the rules of the house. Remove the gag now, and let us hear what he has to say for himself. Perhaps he has learned to know better." "Nora, you are here to save me?" painfully mumbled Geoffrey, when Wan Chao, none too gently as evidenced by a bleeding lip, had complied. "For God's sake, don't believe anything they say. Only get me away from this dreadful place where I'm being—" A menacing gesture from another man who had silently appeared cut off the word, and Geoffrey shrank back as though he knew only too well that the threat was no empty promise. "Oh, Geoffrey, what can I do? Only tell me," she begged. "We had no idea that anything like this. We thought that you were just being kept out of the way. Even now I don't understand." "Come, that will do," interrupted Julby with an impatient growl. "Talk, talk, talk. That's all it ever comes to with your kind of cattle. Do you still think that you are playing at charades, girl? Can't you see the sort of men you have to do with? You don't understand." "No, I do not think you do, but we will very soon explain it. For the next 3 days we must be left undisturbed, and to make sure of that there is nothing on earth that we are going to stick at. You and this man, with the sweep of the minatory crutch, must remain in our hands that long because you know too much. This Carrados has nosed into our affairs, and so he must be reassured and headed off. We can't keep him as well, at least we'd rather not, because he's too influential, it seems, and he set inquiry afoot, and before our time was up, there might be the hell of a disturbance. Now you have it." "But what have I?" "What you have to do is to convince him that he's been mistaken. If you do that, you have nothing to be afraid of. At the end of 3 days, you can both walk out. The best guarantee is that we have nothing to fear from you then, and it would be inconvenient to have to leave someone to keep you. If you refuse, well, you see your friend there? A little more strain, a very little perhaps, and I'm afraid, I really am afraid, Miss Kelly, that his rather disturbed mind may be permanently unbalanced. As for yourself, I scarcely like to put into words what will probably happen to you before you get away. These crude Eastern races are so primitive in their ideas of the use they make of female captives." "Oh, you fiend," she flung back. "You unutterable brute. You would never dare." "Dare? I dare?" he retorted, dragging himself nearer to her and raising his form to the full on his props almost with a savage grandeur. "Look at me, brute that I am. Look, girl, and then think. What is there that men can do to me now that nature hasn't done already?" "Nora," besought the unfortunate Tilehurst, pitifully whining in his distress, "don't drive them to do worse than I've had already. Get me away on any terms, for God's sake, before I do anything they ask you." "Oh, you poor," she cried out in her pain, immeasurably shocked at his pathetic deterioration. Then turning to Julby again, "If I do as you want, no harm will come to either of you meanwhile, and at the end of 3 days you will be free. Tell me exactly what I have to do." At a sign, the prisoner was led away again, and the door of the anteroom closed on his humiliation. George Larch alone remained to lend Julby whatever support the developments might entail, and the moment was almost reached towards which so much preparation had been directed. "When Carrados comes up, you must receive him naturally and convince him that it's all been an unfortunate misunderstanding about us here," said the cripple, in reply to Nora's admission of surrender. "Don't try any half-and-half shilly-shallying. Make no error about it, girl. You've got to succeed, and to do it thoroughly. It isn't an easy thing to deceive Max Carrados. No matter what I say, he may not. Ag," he snarled impatiently, "it won't be an easy thing to watch your young man being put through a course, or to find yourself strapped down, will it? You're clever enough in your way, I'll be bound, and the fellow's blind anyhow. You came to spy on us here, didn't you? You've, let us say, been in every corner of the house, and gone through all the papers. Well, it's... what? A bloomer. You have found simply an old fellow who has made a little something by years of hard work in his second-hand shop and is now retiring into private life and doesn't want to be troubled. Eh? Eh? I must succeed, she whispered, more to herself than in assent. God help me.